You think you're a real mechanic? The words cut through the dusty air like a blade. 22-year-old Maya stood frozen in her oil-stained coveralls, facing the cruelest smile she'd ever seen. Behind the millionaire, his black SUVs gleamed like predators, and his bodyguards watched with uncomfortable silence. The neighbors gathered, sensing blood in the water. Maya's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the fire building in her chest. This man had no idea he was about to witness something that would shatter his world. In this humble garage in Detroit, where the scent of motor oil mixed with dreams, a confrontation was brewing that would change everything. Sometimes the biggest engines have the quietest hearts, and sometimes the smallest voices carry the most power. Maya Rodriguez wiped her hands on the same blue coveralls her grandfather had worn for 30 years. The fabric held memories in every thread, oil stains that told stories, patches that spoke of persistence, pockets worn smooth by tools, passed down through generations. At 5:30 a.m., the garage felt like a cathedral. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows, illuminating motes that danced like spirits around her workspace. She moved through her morning ritual with reverence, checking the coffee pot her grandfather had left behind, organizing tools with the precision of a surgeon, breathing in the familiar cologne of motor oil and possibility. "Morning, Grandpa," she whispered to the framed photo on the workbench. Miguel Rodriguez smiled back, the man who taught her that engines had souls, that mechanics were doctors for steel hearts. Her first patient today was Mrs. Chen's 1995 Honda Civic. The engine knocked with an irregular rhythm, like a drummer who'd lost the beat. Maya slid underneath, her trained ear catching what others missed. A timing belt crying for help, pistons whispering secrets only she understood. The garage phone rang, jolting her from concentration. Rodriguez Auto Repair, Maya speaking. "Is this the girl everyone's talking about?" The voice was rough, skeptical. "The one who supposedly fixed Jimmy Patterson's Corvette when nobody else could?" Maya's spine straightened. Word traveled fast in Detroit's automotive underground. "I fixed Mr. Patterson's fuel injection system, yes, sir. What can I do for you?" A pause. Then, "My boss has a situation. European car, real complicated. You probably can't handle it, but he's desperate." The dismissal in his tone sparked something dangerous in Maya's chest. She'd heard variations of this conversation 100 times. "You're too young, too small, too female." "Bring it in," she said quietly. "I'll take a look." After hanging up, Maya stood in her grandfather's cathedral of chrome and dreams, unaware that fate had just dialed her number. Outside, the city hummed with Monday morning energy, carrying the scent of coffee and exhaust, ambition and broken promises. She had no idea that her biggest test was already speeding toward her on Italian leather seats, wrapped in arrogance and pain, driven by a man who'd forgotten how to feel anything but rage. The Honda's engine knocked again, patient and persistent. Maya smiled and reached for her stethoscope. Some heartbeats were easy to fix. Others would require a miracle. And miracles, her grandfather always said, were just science waiting for the right hands to believe in them. 40 miles across town, Richard Blackstone stood in his climate-controlled garage, staring at $50 million worth of automotive perfection. McLaren F1, Ferrari F40, Lamborghini Miura, each car a masterpiece, each one failing to fill the hole in his chest where his daughter's laughter used to live. 5 years since Emma's accident, and the guilt still chewed at him like rust eating through steel. He'd been in Tokyo, closing another billion-dollar deal when the call came. His 8-year-old princess, gone in a moment of twisted metal and shattered glass. The therapists talked about healing. The lawyers talked about liability. Richard talked to no one, building walls of cruelty that kept the world at arm's length. Easier to be feared than pitied. Easier to break others before they could break him. His assistant, Marcus Webb, approached with careful steps. 23 years of service had taught him to read his boss's moods like storm clouds. "Mr. Blackstone, the McLaren situation? Richard's jaw tightened. 2 weeks ago, his crown jewel, McLaren F1 chassis number 27, one of only 64 ever built, had simply stopped singing. The 6.1-litre BMW V12 that should roar like thunder now coughed like a dying animal. "Any word from the Munich team?" Richard's voice carried the edge that made competitors surrender before negotiations began. "They've given up, sir. Along with the Ferrari specialists in Italy and the McLaren-certified technicians from England," Marcus hesitated. "There might be one more option." Richard's laugh was bitter as burnt coffee. "What option?" "We've exhausted every expert on 3 continents. There's a small shop in Detroit. The owner supposedly has a gift with European engines. Fixed a 73 Carrera RS that 3 Porsche dealers couldn't diagnose. Supposedly." Richard savoured the word like poison. "And who owns this miracle shop? Some grizzled German with 40 years' experience?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, sir, it's a young woman. Maya Rodriguez. She's 22. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Richard's eyes went flat, dangerous. "A girl? You're suggesting I take a $45 million automobile to a child playing with wrenches?" "Sir, the references are extraordinary. Jimmy Patterson swears she's—" "Patterson's an idiot who races muscle cars on weekends." Richard turned toward his McLaren, its silver paint reflecting his cold stare. "But you know what, Marcus? I'm desperate enough to watch this little girl embarrass herself. Maybe it'll be entertaining." He didn't say the rest. That humiliating others had become his drug of choice, the only thing that made him feel powerful instead of broken. That destroying someone else's dignity gave him a moment's respite from his own self-destruction. "Schedule it," he said. "And Marcus, bring the full security detail. I want witnesses when this joke falls apart." As his assistant hurried away, Richard remained with his silent automobiles, each one perfect, pristine, and utterly incapable of bringing back the sound of tiny feet running down marble hallways. Emma had loved cars. At 6, she could identify makes and models from engine sounds alone. At 7, she'd sit in his lap during Sunday drives, tiny hands on the steering wheel, brown eyes bright with wonder. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to fix cars like the ones you buy." The memory hit like a physical blow. Richard gripped the McLaren's doorframe, knuckles white. Tomorrow, he'd meet another little girl who thought she could fix things. He'd make sure she learned better. Tuesday morning arrived with Detroit's particular blend of industrial poetry, the distant hum of the Ford plant mixing with church bells, and the hopeful chatter of children walking to school. Maya finished adjusting the carburetor on a '67 Mustang when 3 black Escalades pulled up like storm clouds. The vehicles were so pristine they seemed alien against the garage's honest grime. Tinted windows reflected the morning sun like mirror shields, and when the doors opened, Maya felt the temperature drop 10 degrees. Richard Blackstone emerged like a corporate warlord surveying conquered territory. His Italian suit cost more than most people earned in 6 months. His shoes, handcrafted leather that whispered against concrete, had never touched a puddle. The watch on his wrist could fund a small business. Behind him, 4 bodyguards positioned themselves with military precision. These weren't gym rats in cheap suits. These were professionals, expensive shadows with dead eyes and perfect posture. "This is the place?" Richard's voice carried the kind of disdain usually reserved for roadkill. His gaze swept the garage like a health inspector finding violations. "Marcus, are you having a breakdown?" Marcus Webb, a nervous man in his 50s, wrung his hands. "Sir, please." The recommendations were very strong. From who? Other delusional idiots? Maya emerged from behind the Mustang, wiping her hands on a shop rag. She'd learned to read people quickly in this business. The time wasters, the genuine customers, the ones who thought her gender made her stupid. This man radiated something different, something cruel. "Good morning," she said. voice steady despite the intimidation display. "I'm Maya Rodriguez. You called about a European car needing diagnosis?" Richard's laugh was like breaking glass. He looked her up and down with theatrical disgust, taking in her oil-stained coveralls, her pulled-back hair, her 22-year-old face marked by concentration rather than makeup. "You've got to be kidding me." His voice rose, carrying across the neighborhood. "Marcus drove me across the city to watch a child play dress-up." Mrs. Patterson from next door paused her sweeping to stare. The Martinez boys stopped their basketball game. Even the stray cat that lived behind the dumpster seemed to sense the tension and slunk away. Maya felt her cheeks burn, but kept her voice level. "Sir, if you'd like to tell me about your car's symptoms, I'd be happy to—" "Symptoms," Richard's voice dripped venom. "Listen carefully, little girl. That McLaren out there is worth more than this entire neighborhood. It's a precision instrument built by masters of engineering. And you—" he pointed at her like she was something diseased. "You think you can fix what BMW's best technicians couldn't?" The crowd was growing. Mr. Washington from the barbershop stood in his doorway. 3 teenagers on bikes had stopped to watch. Maya felt the weight of their stares, the mixture of sympathy and second-hand embarrassment. "I understand your concern," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Expensive cars deserve expert care. My grandfather worked for Ford's racing division for 30 years. He taught me to respect every engine, regardless of—" "Your grandfather?" Richard's smile was surgical in its precision. "Let me guess. He changed oil and rotated tires, and now you think that qualifies you for precision work?" Maya's hands clenched. She thought of her grandfather's framed certificates on the wall, his engineering degree from Michigan State, his 30 patents in fuel injection technology, the photos of him with Carroll Shelby and other racing legends. "Actually, he was chief engineer for—" "I don't care if he was Henry Ford's personal mechanic." Richard's voice boomed across the street. "Women don't belong under the hoods of real cars. Your brain isn't wired for complex mechanical systems. You should be teaching kindergarten or arranging flowers, not pretending to understand internal combustion engines." The words hit like physical blows. Maya heard Mrs. Patterson gasp. The teenagers muttered among themselves, some looking angry, others embarrassed for her. Even Richard's bodyguards seemed uncomfortable with their boss's performance. But something extraordinary happened in that moment of maximum humiliation. Instead of crumbling, Maya felt steel enter her spine. She thought of her grandfather's voice. "Mija, when small men try to make you smaller, that's when you show them how big you really are." She raised her chin and looked Richard Blackstone directly in the eye. "Mr. Blackstone, and yes, I know who you are. You can insult my age, my gender, and my shop all you want, but you drove 40 miles because you're desperate. Your McLaren is broken, and nobody else can fix it." Richard's face flushed red. He wasn't used to pushback from anyone, especially not from someone he considered beneath contempt. "You arrogant little—" "So here's my offer," Maya continued, her voice carrying now, strong and clear. "Bring your broken car to my toy garage. Let me diagnose it without even opening the hood. When I tell you exactly what's wrong, you can decide if this little girl knows what she's talking about." The neighborhood held its breath. Even the traffic seemed quieter. Richard stared at her with the focused intensity of a predator who'd just heard prey roar back. "And when you fail?" His voice was soft now, deadly. "When you embarrass yourself in front of all these people?" Maya's smile was her grandfather's. Confident, knowing, unafraid. "Then I'll personally apologize for wasting your valuable time. But when I fix your car, Mr. Blackstone, you're going to apologize to me. In front of everyone here, on your knees." The silence that followed was absolute. Somewhere in that quiet moment, Maya Rodriguez stopped being just another young mechanic trying to make it in a man's world. She became something much more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose. The McLaren F1 arrived on a custom trailer worth more than most houses. Even transported like a sleeping giant, it commanded respect. Liquid silver paint that seemed to move in the sunlight, carbon fiber details that whispered of aerospace engineering, proportions so perfect they looked designed by God rather than man. A crowd had gathered. Word traveled fast in Detroit neighborhoods, and nothing drew attention like the promise of David facing Goliath. Mr. Washington brought folding chairs from his barbershop. The Martinez family emerged onto their porch. Even old Mrs. Chen, who rarely left her house, watched from her window. Richard stood beside his automotive masterpiece like a general presenting his ultimate weapon. McLaren F1 1998, chassis number 27, 6.1-litre BMW V12, 627 horsepower, top speed 240 miles per hour. This car has been maintained by certified technicians since the day it left the factory. His voice carried the satisfaction of a man about to watch his enemy stumble. Munich's finest diagnosticians spent a week with it. Ferrari's best engineers flew in from Italy. McLaren's own specialists came from England. All of them failed. Maya approached the car with the reverence her grandfather had taught her, slowly, respectfully, like approaching a sleeping animal that might either purr or bite. She didn't touch the paint, didn't open anything, just walked around the perimeter with her head tilted, listening. "What's she doing?" one of the teenagers whispered. "Probably praying," Richard laughed. "Maybe she thinks God will whisper the answer in her ear." But Maya wasn't praying. She was doing something far more difficult. She was hearing what others couldn't. The engine, even at rest, told stories. Metal expansion patterns from heat cycling, the subtle scent of combustion byproducts, the way morning air moved around the car's aerodynamic surfaces. She knelt beside the front wheel, not touching, just listening. The crowd murmured, some impressed by her focus, others wondering if she'd lost her mind. Richard checked his watch impatiently. "Any day now," he called out. "We don't have all morning for this show." Maya closed her eyes, filtering out the crowd noise, Richard's mockery, her own nervous heartbeat. In the silence, the McLaren spoke to her in the same language her grandfather had taught her to understand 30 years ago, in this very spot. Irregular heat patterns in the engine bay. A subtle electrical hum that didn't match the standard frequency. The particular metallic tang that meant exotic alloys were stressed beyond design parameters. She stood up, brushed off her knees, and faced Richard with absolute certainty. "Your car has two primary issues and one secondary problem that's masquerading as the main fault." Richard's smirk faltered slightly. He hadn't expected technical language. "The primary electrical issue is a failing crankshaft position sensor that's sending intermittent signals to the engine management system. It's not completely dead, which is why it doesn't throw a consistent error code. It fails only under specific RPM and temperature combinations." Marcus Webb fumbled for his diagnostic tablet, scrolling through weeks of reports. His face went pale. "Sir, that's exactly the sensor the Munich team suspected, but they couldn't confirm because the fault was intermittent." Maya continued, her voice steady and clinical. "The second primary issue is carbon buildup on the intake valves, specifically cylinders 4, 8, and 11. This is causing uneven compression ratios and explains the rough idle pattern." She paused, watching Richard's confident expression crack like poorly tempered glass. "But the real problem, the one that's been hiding behind these symptoms, is that someone installed an aftermarket engine management chip. It's not compatible with BMW's Vanos variable timing system, and it's causing the ECU to overcorrect for phantom problems that don't actually exist." The neighborhood went cemetery quiet. Even the traffic seemed to hush. Richard stared at her with the expression of a man watching his world tilt off its axis. "The chip was installed approximately 4 months ago," Maya continued, "probably to increase performance. but it's fighting with the original BMW programming, creating a cascade failure that manifests as multiple seemingly unrelated problems. Marcus was frantically checking his records. "Sir, the performance modification, you authorized it in January, 4 months ago." Maya moved to the rear of the car, still not touching it. "There's also a minor exhaust leak at the collector junction that's affecting back pressure readings. You can hear it if you know what to listen for. It creates a harmonic resonance at idle that sounds like valve float, but isn't." She turned to face Richard, who looked like he'd been hit by lightning. "The fix is straightforward. Remove the aftermarket chip, recalibrate the ECU to factory specifications, replace the crankshaft position sensor, perform a carbon cleaning service on the affected cylinders, and repair the exhaust leak. Total repair time, 6 hours. Total parts cost, $800. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Mr. Washington started clapping. Mrs. Patterson joined in. The teenagers cheered. Even some of Richard's bodyguards looked impressed despite themselves. Richard stood frozen, his face cycling through disbelief, embarrassment, and something that might have been terror. This young woman had just performed the diagnostic equivalent of surgery with a blindfold, identifying problems that had stumped million-dollar facilities. "How?" he whispered, the word barely audible. Maya's smile was gentle but firm. "Because I listen, Mr. Blackstone. Engines talk if you know their language. My grandfather spent 40 years teaching me that every mechanical heartbeat tells a story." She gestured to the McLaren, still gleaming in the morning sun. "Your car isn't broken, sir. It's just confused. Give me 6 hours and I'll translate what it's been trying to tell you." Richard looked around at the crowd, at his expensive car, at the young woman who had just shattered every assumption he'd built his arrogance upon. For the first time in 5 years, he had no idea what to say. In that moment, Maya Rodriguez became something more than a mechanic. She became a reminder that genius doesn't wear expensive clothes, and wisdom doesn't require an impressive address. She became the woman who would change everything. What happened next would be talked about in Detroit auto circles for decades. Maya raised the McLaren's hood with the reverence of a priest opening a sacred text, revealing the BMW V12 that had confounded Europe's finest minds. The engine bay was a cathedral of precision, aluminum and carbon fiber arranged in perfect harmony, every component positioned with mathematical beauty. Richard watched nervously as Maya began her work, moving with the fluid grace of someone born to this calling. "You sure you know what you're doing?" Richard's voice had lost its earlier venom, replaced by genuine anxiety. "That engine costs more than most people's houses." Maya didn't look up from the maze of sensors and wiring. "Mr. Blackstone, this BMW S72 V12 is essentially a detuned Formula One engine. My grandfather helped design the fuel injection system BMW used in their early racing programs. I've been studying these specs since I was 12. Her hands moved with surgical precision, each action deliberate and confident. The crowd pressed closer, watching her navigate the complex engine like she was reading a familiar book. Even Richard's bodyguard seemed mesmerized by her expertise. "There," she said, pointing to a small electronic module nestled between intake manifolds. "Your aftermarket chip. It's fighting with the original ECU about fuel mapping every time the engine reaches operating temperature." She carefully disconnected the device, and Marcus immediately pulled out his diagnostic tablet. "Error codes are clearing, sir. The system is recognizing factory parameters again." Maya moved to the crankshaft position sensor, her movement smooth and economical. No wasted motion, no hesitation. "This little guy has been lying to your computer for weeks. When sensors fail gradually, they create ghost problems that drive technicians crazy." As she worked, something remarkable happened. Richard found himself watching, not with suspicion, but with growing fascination. This young woman possessed a natural mechanical intuition he'd never seen before. the ability to communicate with machines on a level that transcended mere technical knowledge. "My daughter wanted to be a mechanic," he said suddenly, surprising himself with the admission. The words hung in the air like smoke. Maya's hands paused for just a moment. Past tense? Richard's jaw tightened. "She died 5 years ago. Car accident. She was 8. The neighborhood seemed to exhale collectively. Even hardened men like Mr. Washington looked away, recognizing the particular weight of that kind of grief. Maya continued working, but her voice softened. "I'm sorry for your loss. 8 years old. She must have been curious about everything." "She was." Richard's voice cracked slightly. "Emma could identify car engines by sound alone. She'd sit in my garage for hours, asking questions, taking apart old parts I gave her." He paused. "She would have loved meeting you." Maya finished installing the new crankshaft sensor and looked up at Richard directly. For the first time, she saw past his cruelty to the broken father underneath. "She sounds like she was an amazing little girl." "She was everything good about me," Richard whispered. "When she died, I lost the only part of myself worth saving." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to build. Maya wiped her hands on her rag, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Blackstone, Emma didn't take the good parts of you with her when she died. She left them with you to honor her memory." Richard's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back for 5 years. "I've been so angry, at God, at the world, at anyone who reminded me of what I lost. I became a monster." Maya began the engine's carbon cleaning process, the gentle hiss of specialized equipment filling the silence. Grief makes us do terrible things sometimes, but it doesn't have to define us forever. As she worked, Richard found himself really seeing his surroundings for the first time. The garage wasn't a hovel. It was a shrine to craftsmanship, tools arranged with museum-quality precision, photos of restored classics covering the walls, certificates and awards displaying decades of expertise. "I humiliated you," he said quietly, "in front of your whole neighborhood. I said things that were true," Maya finished with a slight smile. "I am young, and I am a woman in a man's business. And this is a small garage in a working-class neighborhood." Richard shook his head. "But you're also brilliant, gifted, more talented than technicians with 40 years' experience." Maya started the McLaren's engine. The V12 roared to life with a perfect symphony of mechanical precision, smooth, powerful, exactly as the engineers in Munich had intended. The crowd cheered spontaneously. Richard stared at his resurrected car in disbelief. How is this possible? The best minds in 3 countries couldn't figure this out. Maya's smile carried her grandfather's wisdom. "They were listening with their computers, Mr. Blackstone. I was listening with my heart. Machines respond to love, just like people do." She revved the engine gently, and the sound was pure automotive poetry, 627 horsepower singing in perfect harmony. Sometimes the most expensive education can't teach you what growing up in a place like this does. Here, we learn that everything can be fixed if you care enough to understand what's broken. Richard walked around his car, hearing it run flawlessly for the first time in months. But more than that, he was seeing Maya clearly for the first time, not as a target for his cruelty, but as the extraordinary young woman she truly was. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the crowd. "More than that, I owe you my respect." Maya nodded graciously. "Just treat the next person with kindness, Mr. Blackstone. That's apology enough for me." But Richard was already sinking to his knees in the garage's dusty floor, in front of the entire neighborhood, in front of his bodyguards and his assistant, and anyone else who cared to watch a millionaire's pride finally break in the right direction. The sight of Richard Blackstone on his knees in a Detroit garage sent shockwaves through the crowd. Here was a man who commanded boardrooms, who made senators return his calls, who could buy and sell small companies before breakfast, humbling himself before a 22-year-old mechanic. "Maya Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed air. "I have no excuse for my behavior. I humiliated you, insulted your family, and tried to destroy your reputation because of my own pain. You are extraordinary, and I am ashamed." Tears streamed down his face, the first he'd shed since Emma's funeral. "I've spent 5 years being cruel to anyone who reminded me of my daughter's joy, her curiosity, her fearless spirit. But you embody everything she loved about cars, about problem-solving, about never giving up." Maya felt her own eyes well up. The anger she'd carried all morning melted away, replaced by recognition of shared loss and the possibility of healing. "Mr. Blackstone, please stand up." "Dignity isn't earned on your knees." Richard rose slowly, wiping his eyes without shame. The crowd watched in respectful silence as two broken people found unexpected understanding in a place that smelled of motor oil and hope. "I want to make this right," Richard said. "Not just the apology, but everything. What would it cost to expand this garage, to give you the facility your talent deserves?" Maya blinked in surprise. That's not necessary. I appreciate." "It's completely necessary," Richard interrupted gently. "Emma dreamed of a place where she could learn to fix cars. Maybe I can't give that to her anymore, but I can help create something that honors what she wanted." Marcus stepped forward, still processing his boss's transformation. "Sir, are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting we turn this garage into the finest restoration facility in the Midwest," Richard said, his voice growing stronger with purpose. "European specialists, state-of-the-art equipment, everything Maya needs to work on the most challenging cases." Maya looked around her grandfather's humble workspace, trying to imagine it transformed. "This place, it's been in my family for 30 years. It has history, memories." "We keep every memory," Richard said firmly. "Your grandfather's photos, his tools, his legacy. We just build around them, make them the foundation of something even more beautiful." "Mr." Washington called out from his folding chair, "Young lady, this man's offering you a gift. Don't let pride make you stupid." The crowd laughed, breaking some of the emotional tension. Maya found herself smiling despite the magnitude of what was happening. "Mr. Blackstone, why would you do this? You don't even know me." Richard looked at his perfectly running McLaren, then back at Maya. "Because you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. And because Emma would have wanted me to help someone with your gift." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But I want something in return. Not money. I have enough of that. I want to work here, to learn from you, to understand what my daughter saw in engines and oil changes and the magic of making broken things whole again." Maya stared at him in disbelief. "You want to work here, as in actually work?" "I've spent 20 years making money," Richard said simply. "I'd like to spend whatever time I have left making something meaningful, if you'll have me." The teenagers on their bikes started cheering. Mrs. Patterson wiped her eyes with her apron. Even the stray cat seemed to sense that something special was happening and ventured closer to the crowd. Maya extended her hand to Richard, oil-stained fingers meeting manicured ones. "Partners?" she asked. "Students and teacher," Richard corrected, shaking her hand firmly. "I have a lot to learn about what really matters." As they shook hands in front of the purring McLaren and the cheering neighborhood, neither realized they were beginning the most important collaboration of their lives. A partnership built not on contracts or profit margins, but on shared loss, mutual respect, and the revolutionary idea that healing comes from serving something larger than yourself. Maya Rodriguez had fixed more than an engine that day. She'd repaired a human heart that everyone, including its owner, thought was beyond salvation, and Richard Blackstone had found something worth more than his entire fortune. A second chance to be the man his daughter always believed he could be. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. Rodriguez's classic restoration stood as a testament to what happens when unlimited resources meet unlimited passion. The facility sprawled across 4 bays, equipped with diagnostic computers that could analyze any car built since 1960, lifts that could handle everything from vintage Beetles to modern supercars, and a paint booth that rivaled factory installations. But the heart of the operation remained unchanged. Maya's grandfather's original workbench still occupied the central position. His photos still smiled from the walls, and his philosophy, "Every engine has a story to tell," was painted in gold letters above the main entrance. Maya emerged from beneath a 1967 Shelby Cobra, her new coveralls bearing the shop's logo, a heart made of interlocking gears. At 23, she commanded respect from mechanics twice her age, but the oil stains under her fingernails proved she hadn't forgotten where she came from. "Maya," Richard called from across the shop. 6 months of real work had transformed him too. His hands were permanently stained now, his expensive suits replaced with practical coveralls. The weight of genuine purpose had straightened his shoulders and put life back in his eyes. "The Lamborghini Miura's ready for its test drive," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Want to do the honors?" Maya grinned. "You restored that transmission yourself, Richard. You should be the one to drive it first." Richard shook his head. "I'm still the apprentice here. Master mechanics get first test drives." Their partnership had evolved into something neither expected, a blend of mentorship, friendship, and shared mission that transcended their different backgrounds. Richard brought business acumen and resources. Maya brought genius and heart. Together, they were saving automotive history, one rescued classic at a time. The Miura fired to life with a growl that made everyone in the shop pause and smile. It was the sound of resurrection, of dreams given steel and motion, of 2 broken people building something beautiful together. "Mr. Blackstone," called Jenny Martinez, their newest apprentice.